5 o'clock, 6 o'clock somewhere.
Time change last weekend.
All right, it's 5 o'clock. We'll go on and call the meeting to order. Lonnie should be in shortly. First order, I'd like to welcome Jim Brown to the board as our newest member.
Welcome, Jim.
Second item is the approval of minutes from the March 21st, 2023 meeting. If we've all had a chance to look at them.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion or changes to be made? A motion, a second, all in favor? Aye. Opposed, same. Hey, Lonnie. Hearing none, the minutes are approved. Perfect timing, we're ready to start. Tonight, we have two public hearings. The first is Vision Engineering LLC for Greer Land Company has applied for a variance at 2596 South Danville Bypass, Danville, Kentucky, to reduce the perimeter landscaping requirements of 10-foot minimum to a 4-foot minimum along the South Danville Bypass right-of-way and a 5-foot minimum along the Houstonville Road right-of-way. A variance is also requested for a reduction of 25 linear foot of required screening shrubs along the Houstonville Road right-of-way. The property is zoned highway business.
Mr. Chairman, I had this request from the public before that when members speak, make sure the green is illuminated on your microphone, just so that it gets picked up for the streaming.
Okay, and that's with the button should be up. Mine doesn't have a green light, I don't think, but. Thanks.
There you go. Yep. Yeah, it doesn't really help in here, but it helps with the stream. And if you can just try and speak into it, it helps pick it up as well.
Okay,
All right, I can go over this request as best I can. So essentially, we're looking at two variances. This is a result because this lot, it has triple frontage, so it has frontage along the public right-of-way for the bypass here. It has frontage along 127 for the public right-of-way, and then it has frontage along Jane Trail. The first request is a result of this provision of the ordinance that says all screens between a VUA and right-of-way must be a minimum of 10 feet in width. I've highlighted here where on their proposed site plan, they're not showing the 10 feet in width that's required. Along the 127, they're showing a minimum of 5 feet rather than the 10 feet. And then along the bypass, they're showing a minimum of 4 feet in this corner. I think most of it's 5 feet. I'll let Jihad say that. But essentially, we would typically require the 10 feet, but they are looking at that 5-foot and the 4-foot minimum. The applicant has indicated that this is a result of allowing additional parking on the site. We do require only 89 spaces for the site. Their proposed site plan, when they were meeting the requirement, showed 101 spaces. The proposed site plan with this, when they're not meeting the requirements, is 131, 32? Yeah, 130 approximately. I think the owner wanted to get up to 140 based on demand for the restaurant. There's obviously no off-street parking available along Jane Trail, so that might be something to consider. Also, I went on the site just to take a few photos when you're looking at the right-of-way. So when you're facing 127 or Houstonville Road and then facing the bypass, they are pretty significantly set back already. Aside from the shrub screening waiver that they're asking for, they are going to be meeting all of the landscaping requirements along Houstonville Road and the bypass. So they're not asking to reduce the amount that's required, but rather just the distance. You can also see the elevation change. So I don't know if reducing the screening would have that much of an impact visually. You just are looking for whether they're meeting the required findings for a variance. The second request, I don't know if we want to vote on these separately or together.
It depends on whether we think the same justifications support the respective variances. The board may find that some of the same circumstances on the land justify or do not justify a variance, and if they need to be split up because different factors speak to them, or because one variance is more controversial than the other, then we can split them up.
Yep.
I think we can reserve that till the end.
Okay. So now to describe some of the special circumstances that you see on the lot. There are two major gas easements that run through this lot. So this is I believe 100-foot, and this is a 50-foot gas easement. There are two major gas lines that run underneath this property. The gas company has essentially indicated that no vertical structures are allowed within these easements. That includes plantings, that includes lights, that includes structures, anything you can think of. So it certainly causes some constraints on the land, as well as having the triple frontage of having VUA adjoining 3 separate public right-of-ways. So that is something to consider when you're looking at both variance requests. So to get into the second one, essentially we require 70% of VUA adjoining a public right-of-way to be screened by shrubs. When I did the calculations for this, they're basically 25 linear feet short. And as I highlighted here, the reason that they're short is because they are not allowed to put any shrubs within these easements here. So it's not them trying to go around the screening requirement. It's rather that they physically can't fit in the 70% based on the easements that exist there. Are there any questions on those two requests? If not, I can let, the engineer that drew up the site plan is also here, so I'm not sure if he'll have anything to add.
Okay. Are there any questions for Michaela? Okay, this time I'd like to hear from the applicant. And if you would, state your name
Do you want to take the mic? There's cell phone.
and
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
if you'll just state your name and position and your promise that testimony you give will be true and accurate to the best of your knowledge.
Yes, sir.
And your name, please.
My name is Jihad Hallani with Vision Engineering. My address is 128 East Renner Road, Lexington, Kentucky, 40517.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Just in addition to what the staff has mentioned, is that a little bit of history on this project. This property used to be a couple of restaurants before, and the last one was a Chinese restaurant. I prepare an exhibit that shows the current easement on the site, that shows where the gas easement and overhead electric easement that restrict kind of the location of the building and the orientation of it.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm.
So the yellow color represent, as Michaela mentioned, that will be the gas easement, and the red will be the overhead electric, which is after we draw this layout, we met with KU, and they told us that we may lose also additional couple of parking spaces because they cannot relocate some of the overhead electric that we were hoping to be able to relocate it. So between this two easement, so there's almost 41% of the property is kind of occupied by easement, and then which is kind of based on this easement location, the building location and orientation is kind of restricted to that location. So we don't have any room, and I will mention why it's important. And the reason it's important because if we could rotate the building in certain direction, like 90 degrees, we will have a lot more able to get more parking spaces and able to meet the requirement of the requirement of the 10 feet perimeter landscaping. And also, this property has been in front of the board before, and your board has been very supportive to us on previous occasion. I think it was in 2017 or 2019. And at that time, that project did not move forward because there's a lot of restriction by the gas company. So we cannot, for example, we cannot use curb and gutters. We have to use certain type of curbs. We cannot use a concrete sidewalk. We have to use certain different material. We cannot place a fill. Somebody has to be there during the construction. You cannot have a pavement more than 100 feet without having sniffer, and these sniffers are so expensive. So by the time you add all these construction costs, it's kind of make the previous proposal, which was chilly at that time, not able to proceed forwards. Plus, we have another tenant came in, like a jewelry store or car wash or oil change, I don't remember. So basically, they were not able to kind of make this project proceed forward. Today, in front of you, we have proposals that has been approved by the gas company, and we have a tenant that understand the area, it's a Drake restaurant, which is a very successful restaurant, has been successful on every community they go to, and they definitely will be a great asset for this community, and they are very excited to be part of the Danville community. And as you know, that restaurant draws a lot of volume of traffic. I mean, we have the zoning ordinance requirement, and then also you have business model requirement. And they tried this restaurant, as you know, in multiple location, different community, and they know what their parking needed, what's their needed for their parking, how much they can draw, and this is kind of dictated by their business model. In addition, also, as the staff mentioned, is that this site is bounded by 3 right-of-ways, and also the one that we are asking the waiver is not Jane Trail. We meet the requirement. It's just the two bypasses, the US 127 and the South Danville bypass, which is on US 127. We have an excess of 180 feet at the closest location between the edge of the parking lot and the roadway itself. And on the South Danville, we are basically 92 feet. Oh, I'm sorry, between the parking lot from the US 127 and the parking lot of our project, the closest distance is 180 feet. And then from the bypass to the closest corner of the parking lot is 92 feet. And then we are not asking for, as Michaela mentioned, we're not asking for reduction in plant material or plant height or plant counts, or as we can redistribute them on the site. It's just we are asking to kind of have this number of parking spaces. Plus also on the gas easement, this is something has been dictated by the gas company. We cannot have any period other than the grass. We cannot have any landscaping within the easement itself. We have 2 entrances. We have one entrance located on the east side of the property, and then one on that will be east-south of the property, and then west-south of the property.
But none's either in that location where you're talking about you might lose parking space?
No, not in this location. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, I mean, what we are asking is basically this is a restriction by the overhead electric gas company, and then also the KU, and then the orientation of the building is dictated by that. So we don't believe that our proposal is going to impact alter the public health, the safety, or the welfare. And and this property, the way it is right now, I believe meeting the requirement of the landscaping, and we can exceed it, and I make a commitment today, we can exceed the required landscape by 25%. And then that would be a major improvement to the site. And as is right now, that would be a great improvement. So in addition of meeting the landscape requirement, we would like to propose today to have 25% in addition landscape requirement that we can place it on site to kind of mitigate for this waiver request.
Okay, does the board have any questions from the applicant?
Do you know how many restaurants the Drake's chain has?
No, sir, I don't have, but I know there's a lot of them.
Do you know what the seating capacity of the restaurant is?
That's a good question, I should know. I believe, don't hold me on it, I believe it's 150. Plus they have some outdoor, I'm not sure the count on the outdoor.
Okay, so it's greater than 150.
Yeah.
I was pleased to hear that you've considered the requirements of the gas company with respect to respecting the integrity of these transmission lines.
Yes, sir.
Are there any issues that we should be aware of?
No, sir, this plan, like, as I mentioned before, we had actually, Chile came in, we get their approval, and then it went through Board of Adjustment, and the board was very supportive. Then we have Taco Tico with another tenant, also the gas company approved it, and this one has been in front of them, and
Okay.
they are working on the agreement as we speak, so.
You may in just a minute. You'll be recognized.
Mr. Chair, one more from my part. Mr. Halani, did you say something about mitigation, relocating 25%?
Yes, I was saying that whatever required planting requirement, we are committed to add 25% for landscaping. So in addition to what is required, that would be 125% of what's required.
Understood. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So you're adding another 25% of landscaping where?
On the side, like say, for example, along, we can beef up along Jean Trail. We can have between the like this area over here, sir. This area, we can add landscaping. This area, we can add some landscaping in these locations. And we can add some landscaping in this location over here, this island here, around the building itself.
Okay, so though it's not shown on the drawing, that
No,
is
sir. They're not shown.
part of your commitment?
Correct.
Any more questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Is there anyone here to speak in support of the applicant? In opposition of the applicant?
I just wanted to ask a question.
You may.
I wanted him still up here so I could ask
He
him a
can-
question.
No, would you go to the podium and state your name and your address and your promise that your testimony will be true and accurate to the best of your knowledge?
I get it.
Charles Ferguson, 645 Kings Mill Road, Danville, Burley in the county. I wanted to know what the cover of the gas right-of-ways is. I couldn't understand from your thing, what are you allowed to cover them? You're not going to put concrete on them, are you?
No, sir, we're not allowed to have the concrete on top of the gas line easement.
Yeah,
It's going to be only asphalt, so the sidewalk, they're going to be like kind of paved walks, will be asphalt paved walks. The curbs cannot be concrete curbs, they have to be mounted like kind of curbs that will be, you pile them together. So it's like, we cannot have continuous curbs, so it need to be extrusion curbs. So it's a lot of things.
but right over the right-of-ways will be blacktop,
Correct.
asphalt,
This, or grass,
or grass.
correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
That's where, the parking will be on that too.
Correct. No concrete is permitted.
Gas will take care of themselves. The gas company will take care of their things.
Okay, at this point, we'll close this portion of the hearing to the public and begin the deliberation portion of the hearing. thoughts from the board?
I have no problem.
Mr. Brown? I also support it. I think they've done a beautiful job, you know, working within the parameters they were given with the easements. The offer to add the additional 25% landscaping, I think is generous and correct. And they are very constrained. There's such a, you know, setback from the two major roadways.
So we have two variances, correct?
Three.
Three.
It's two variances. It's two variances.
Yeah.
I included both for the 127 and the bypass to reduce from the 10-foot to the 5-foot along 127 and to the 4-foot along the bypass. We can separate them if you want, but I lumped them in as one because it's the same requirement within the ordinance for the screening.
I'm pleased that the engineer has found a way to accommodate the public safety issues with respect to the gas transmission lines, and appreciate the generous offer of additional landscaping. And with respect to the change in elevation, I can imagine the appearance of this will be attractive. So I recommend approval.
And, you know, one other thought with adding the additional parking over what's required. I don't know if you've been to Cattleman's or Asuka on a Friday night, but their cars are lining the roadways, which are a little obtrusive.
I think it's
Can we
very
do both of them? Can we do both of them on one motion?
I think so, yeah.
Mr. Hill, can we do both on one motion?
You can.
Would
Yes.
you like to help us craft that motion?
If, I'm hearing several statements of support, so this would be a motion in support. You would move to grant all requested variances. In support of that, you could find that there's not an unreasonable circumvention of the zoning ordinance because of unique conditions on the land, specifically large gas line and utility easements, which require no planting or structures upon them. There's also the elevation change on the property and a large distance from the right-of-way, and that would support granting of the variances requested.
I'd like to craft that verbiage into a motion to approve.
I think you can adopt it as suggested. I would only add that approval be conditioned on the volunteered addition of landscaping to the amount of 125% of the ordinance's requirement.
I would, yeah, accept that addition.
Okay, there's a motion. Mr. Lay seconds. Is there any further discussion from the board? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Same. There's none. Motion passes.
Good
Thank
luck.
you. Our second hearing tonight is USA Signs for Papa John's has applied for a variance at 462 West Main Street, Danville, Kentucky, to exceed the maximum area allowed for a wall sign by 51.275 square feet. The property is zoned CB/HD.
Yeah, just to give a little background on the CBHD, so it's zoned central business and it's also in the historic overlay district. When it's in the historic overlay district, it is required to go through the Danville Architectural Heritage Board first and receive a COA or certificate of appropriateness. It did go through the DHB. They do not allow backlit illuminated signs. So that essentially ended up going through City Commission. City Commission granted a waiver of the backlit signs. DHB issued a COA. They submitted an application with us, and they are proposing to exceed the maximum area allowed for a wall sign. So that's why this application is before you all today. I also want to note that there was an existing sign out there that was 75.4 square feet. The new one they're proposing is 75.2 square feet. There is a provision within the zoning ordinance that essentially states even if an existing sign was on the site, if it doesn't meet the provisions of the ordinance, once it's damaged, removed, et cetera, which in this case it was removed due to wind damage, they are required to come into compliance with the ordinance. So that's another reason why they're before you all today to ask for a variance. So to give you a little bit of insight on the lot, this is the Papa John's Baskin Robbins building. So Papa John's is about, 1/3, 1/2 of the existing building. It does have frontage along Church Street. It's about 100 feet from Church Street. The actual facade is right here, so it faces towards Main Street here. It's about 215 feet from West Main Street. It obviously doesn't have frontage, but it does have this shared parking area, so that's another way to access the lot. And sorry, I jumped ahead of myself here, but there's the language on just saying that it is required to come back into compliance with the provisions. That's the previous sign that was out there that has since been removed. What I would calculate for the area of that existing sign is this white part here. I wouldn't have included the whole awning based on the way the zoning ordinance reads. This is their proposal. So they are proposing 75.2 square feet. We would allow 23.925 square feet or 5% of the facade. The percentage of the facade with what they're proposing is 15.7%. None of our zoning districts allow over 10% of the facade for any commercial or industrial zoning district. I think you could look at this site when you go back to the way the lot lays out, and you could say it's a pretty significant distance from the Main Street. When you're looking at Central Business District in particular, which is this zoning district, they do have a 0-foot front setback. It's designed to be for downtown, so when you're walking downtown, that's primarily what's zoned central business. It's more pedestrian oriented, you're closer to the buildings and the facade, so that's kind of why you're looking at the 5%. There are a few other districts like ICD and neighborhood business that also are intended to be smaller scale. Whereas when you're looking at highway business or things that are further set back from the road or bigger businesses, you're looking at the 10%. So to sum up, I do think 15.7% is probably a pretty large ask. I looked back through, we haven't really approved many over 10% aside from the one that we did at the previous meeting, which was 11.5%, which was on the Silver Soul clothing based on the existing sign frame that was in the building. So just things to think about when you're considering this application. But are there any questions for me?
Yes, I have one. Is there any negative concerns from the neighboring?
I didn't receive any calls on this application. No. So, it's, yeah, no calls.
Could you say again what you heard from the Historic Overlay Group?
Yeah, the Historic Overlay District, or the DAHB, the Danville Architectural Heritage Board, they don't really look so much at the size of it or things like that. That falls within our jurisdiction, our ordinance. They're more looking at the compatibility, yeah, and what's existing and preserving the facade. Really, when they're looking at these signs, their primary concern is the backlit. That's why they didn't initially approve it, and it ended up going through City Commission for that. Our ordinance allows for it to be a backlit sign, so I don't have any concerns with that, and we did receive the COA at this point once City Commission granted that waiver. So at this point, we're really just considering the size.
The Architectural Heritage Board, just earlier this month, was trying to remove this property and others from the architectural overlay. Is that correct?
Yeah, they proposed to remove 10 properties from the Historic Overlay District. The Planning Commission recommended approval on that, and then the City Commission denied it.
Yeah.
So it's still within the historic overlay district.
Okay.
Can you go back to the previous that shows the
Yep,
overhead?
this one?
Yes, ma'am. I was just looking to see what around it is historic in nature. And I don't see anything.
The church,
Yeah,
Well, the church is in the next block,
yeah.
but
Yeah.
nothing
That's-
immediately
yeah,
surrounding.
this whole block was within that recommendation to be removed. The staff person, Joni House, for the DHB found that there are no contributing buildings within this block. But it still is within that district, so it's required to meet those standards.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sir?
Do you recall what the city commission's justification for denial was?
Yeah, to sum up as best as I can, essentially there were further conversations about the district. Right now, the district really is there as historic preservation. It's intended to preserve the existing facade. It's not really intended to put architectural standards or design guidelines on new builds. And I think there was a disconnect with what conversations of whether we should have a district or an overlay district that serves that purpose of providing those design guidelines for new builds versus what the historic overlay district is accomplishing now. And so I think they want to take a longer look at that and potentially, we have kind of a few properties that have been added in over the years that aren't contiguous with it. So I think they were looking at the other end of Main Street where we were proposing to pull out a few, and they weren't going to be contiguous. So I think they just wanted to have a larger conversation about what the overlay district accomplishes and whether we should be looking to amend that district or create a new district or whatnot. So I think they just weren't ready to go forward at this time.
So is the AHB going to look at doing a overlay on this to protect future building? Or is that a conversation for another day?
Yeah, ongoing conversations at this point. This just was denied, gosh, probably a couple weeks ago. So
Right.
I think there will be more to come, but I'm not really sure what direction it will go in.
But that denial doesn't tie the hands of the board from deciding tonight. That their decision is more based on kind of the facts as you laid them out rather than inclusion in the.
Yeah, as part of their decision to deny this block from being removed from the historic overlay district, they granted a waiver to this particular property on the backlit sign requirement. So that's why I say they've granted a COA. That's beyond our control at this point. We're really just focusing on the size.
Yeah, just looking for some historical relevance there.
Yeah.
And they're not going to do the awning?
No, their proposal is this, so you can kind of see a mock-up of what it would look like on the facade and then the dimensions there, so it would not be an awning.
And the awning wasn't included in the previous dimensions?
No, we don't include awnings, it's really just the sign area that's promoting the
Okay.
business.
So it looks better.
Any other questions for staff? Can we hear from the applicant, please? And Cassie, can you state your name and your address and promise that your testimony is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge?
Yes, I'm Cassie with USA Signs at 196 West Ridge Drive in Danville, and everything that I say is true and accurate to the best of my ability. So as she said before, the existing sign space on the awning was 0.2 square feet larger. And we have been back and forth on this sign multiple times, and they are proposing that if this is considered too big, that we could also drop it down to 10% of their building space. And the truth is when you're out there, Baskin-Robbins has a huge sign. It takes pretty much their whole building facade on the top. And then you also have Speedway, who has tons of signage out there that is like a Christmas tree. But then you have Papa John's, who has been there for, I don't know, before I moved here, years. And they've been a good part of this community and stuff. And they're just asking to remove the awning and replace the sign that's basically the same exact size as the advertising space as they had before. Especially where they're set so far back off the road. That sign is not gonna be, it's not gonna look huge or gaudy or anything. I mean, it takes a little bit to look back there and find it, especially right now when they don't even have a sign up. So that's just what we're proposing and willing to negotiate on.
I did include the 10%. Cassie submitted drawings for that as well. So it'd be 42.7 square feet rather than the 75.2.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So is the applicant willing to accept 10%?
Yes, they are. I had a meeting with them 2 weeks ago, and they both agreed that they would be willing to meet you all in the middle.
Is that a photo of the smaller of the two?
Yes, that would be the 10%.
Could you go back to the larger one?
Yep.
Could you go back to the smaller one again?
Yep. Sorry, I should have put them side by side. I didn't want to lead the conversation to the 10% unless the applicant brought it up, so. Can you do it one more time? Yep.
Thank you. Any more questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone here to speak in support of the applicant? Anyone speaking in opposition of the applicant? Mr. Ferguson, do you have any questions?
No, sir.
I just want to carry. Thank you. At this time, we'll close the public portion of the hearing and begin deliberation portion of the hearing. So, Board, your thoughts?
I'm inclined to support the 10%.
I kind of think, I understand their request being set so far back off Main Street.
It's so hard to see back there.
And with the Baskin-Robbins sign larger, and it makes me think back to a variance we did on the bypass with the auto parts store and Diesel Tech, to where on the sign, the parts store was so big, it left very little room. And we allowed Diesel Tech to have a little larger sign to be more in line and advertise their business. But it had the condition that if that sign ever,
If they leave,
then the
it's not
variance was,
grandfathered.
yeah, it was not grandfathered, and they'd have to come back. I would propose that we did the same thing on this one. If, I would lean toward granting the larger sign, and if it ever had to be replaced, they would have to come back through the process as they did this time.
If you go with the smaller sign, it's definitely going to be harder to see them from the road.
I think the smaller sign is making it difficult to get there now.
I just think the larger one does have better appearance, looks better. Doesn't look so,
And I think it is what they had before, Yeah, they didn't cause the wind.
And it looks better without the awning. I don't think we should punish them for the wind damage.
Really?
Would you like to make a motion?
if I can remember what you said. I would make a motion to approve the larger sign. That it does not, help me out, Henry, it does not hurt anything.
It won't alter the essential character of the surrounding area because there are other large signs nearby. There are unique circumstances on the property because that building is set so far back from the right-of-way. And I believe I heard the condition that if Papa John's were to leave the property, that another sign could not be put up within the same dimensions. It would have to follow the ordinance or seek a variance.
That would be my motion.
I'll second both of those motions.
Okay, there's a motion, a second. Any further discussion? We'll vote on that motion. All in favor? opposed? So we have one opposed. Does the motion carry, or do we need to? Motion carries. We had one opposition.
Right.
You don't need a unanimous vote to approve, just simple majority.
Okay. So the motion carries and variance is granted. That concludes the hearings for tonight. Is there any old business?
I have none.
Any new business?
None.
I welcome you all to the Earth Day Festival this coming Saturday, April 22nd at Boyle County Extension Office. Many things with respect to environmental impact will be discussed there.
Okay, thank you, Preston.
Thank you for that.
Where is that, Lebanon Road?
Any other announcements?
Preston, where is that on Lebanon Road?
It's an extension office.
Is that where that's at, though? Is that what I'm thinking of, out there by BCTC? Okay.
Yeah. Okay,
I have some new business.
okay.
In our text group we got, could y'all please text me your names on here? I just got the numbers, I don't know.
Yeah. No, that'd be
Thank
good.
you.
And Jim, are you on the text? Did you get text? Did you get a
No,
text today?
I didn't put his text in yet, but
Okay,
I'll get him there.
okay, we'll get you two added. Okay, any other announcements or business? Is there a motion to adjourn? Second? Motion and a second by Mr. Brown. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none. We stand adjourned. Thank you.